reading comes to us today from Matthew chapter 27, verses 11 through 14 and 54. You can find it in the Pew Bible on page 32 in the New Testament version. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified and said, "Truly, this man was God's Son." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
When you're on a train, you leave Boston, you watch the outskirts of the city go by, you watch the countryside, you look at the scenery in Ohio, and eventually I got into Chicago. And once I left Chicago, changing trains, dinner time came around the next night. And as they do on Amtrak, they sit you down next to other people. You don't really have a choice of who you really get to sit with, that is, unless the person's truly obnoxious. I happened to have dinner with two people, a couple, husband and wife. And as we talked, and as things came out, people always ask what you do, and I said, "I'm a pastor." And the woman says, "Well, so am I." It turns out that the woman I met, Reverend Susan is the first American Baptist pastor in this country. She has a church in downtown New York. She has a historic church in the heart of the city, and the wonderful, wonderful man sitting next to her, her husband, was the assistant for a time, the assistant U.S. Attorney General. These are people that you meet, you never know who you're going to meet on a train. I mean, you could even meet a wife or a husband on a train, like I did. Reverend Susan talked to me about the kinds of things they were doing at their church in the historic part of New York, in the downtown area, just a couple of blocks from where J.P. Morgan and some of the other magnates had their homes in the day. Reverend Susan's church is going through a bit of a change because they're having to adapt to the area around them. And what are they doing? They are doing social services to the people in the area who are distressed or downtrodden. And I'll say more about that towards the end of this little message. Susan's husband sat patiently as we talked for probably close to 2 hours about all the people we knew in seminary and all the people we knew in New England and the various pastors. One woman that I danced with one night when I first got to seminary and we went to the reception. She is now the president of Union Theological Seminary, and of course Susan knew her. Anyway, it was absolutely fascinating because they would like to somehow work with us in tandem with our social services ministry. What is their kind of motto? Serving God in the heart of the city. I could not believe it. And so she gives talks in front of thousands of people. And I thought, yeah, okay, all right. So she is first American Baptist pastor. She was a lawyer, breast cancer survivor, and speaker for Jesus Christ. And I thought, no way. So I turned on my phone when I got back to my room, and what did I see? But I saw Reverend Susan standing there in front of thousands of people giving talks all across the nation. She told the story, and this is where I pick up with this message. She told the story of a pastor of themselves, of her and her husband, riding down the road. They had gone on one of their road trips, and they were going through Minnesota. And on their way, as they were driving through, they saw a huge billboard up top in Minnesota. And this billboard said, Minnesota Cremation Society. Now, it's a very bizarre type of sign because it also had an open casket underneath this sign. And what made it even stranger was that the sign said Minnesota Cremation Society. It had an open casket, and it had the words underneath it, think outside of the box. Well, see, for Susan and her husband and for others in their area, they have been thinking outside the box, and they are trying to grow where they are planted, which they have decided is the secret to growing God's kingdom in that place. And I think that will be the same for us. By the way, a year before they visited Tucson, and of course they went out to the Desert Museum, but the place they really loved were the Tucson Botanical Gardens off of Alvernon. And I thought, well, that's unusual. So this was quite the fortuitous meeting, and it led me to where I'm at today with the greatest evangelist in the history of the world, which is Paul. The Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul thought outside of the box. He walked, he talked, he thought outside of the box. And he went on his first missionary journey, and he went a little ways up from Damascus. Now I'm going to back up. Paul was originally named Saul. He was taught Saul of Tarsus. Tarsus is just above Damascus. And Paul grew up there, and Paul learned well there, and he was a Jewish leader. What kind of a Jewish leader was he? He was a Pharisee. He delighted in tormenting Jews who were thinking about becoming Christians. He delighted in killing Jewish people who had converted to Christianity. Paul lived this passionate life on the edge of how many Christians can I kill. And so when Paul is on the road to Damascus, and Yahweh comes up in front of Paul and says, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Why do you do this to my children? It was a transforming moment for this Jewish Pharisaical leader who also happened to be a Roman citizen. There are perks to being a Roman citizen. One of those perks is that you do not end up in jail. Jails, as they knew it back in the first century, are not the jails of today. They were for non-Roman people as a holding station until they got to their real sentence. While Paul and others evangelized the church outside of Jerusalem, it was Peter and the apostles who evangelized the church in Jerusalem. But how in the world would somebody like Paul, who was Saul of Tarsus, who killed Christians, how would he become a disciple so quickly? There were trust issues. Can you imagine that? Paul had trust issues with the apostles, and it would be 3 years before he would go out on his first mission. His relationship was a rocky one with the Jewish leaders. He had to learn about Christianity. He had to learn about the message of Christ. As we all do. What do we call that? In Christianity, we call that discipleship. And that is something that without that, we only have a part of a faith. Without discipleship, without learning, our faith is only half of what it could be. It is important to know and understand the words of transformation, the words that Paul took to the people out there in the areas apart from Jerusalem. Paul goes on his first mission trip. The church leaders call him back to Jerusalem. He goes back, and depending on how you read those two chapters in Acts 15 and 16, there is both praise for Paul and contention. Paul talks about the various converts he's made, and James, the Apostle James, supports Paul. Paul says salvation comes by faith alone. Salvation is given to Gentiles. Salvation is part of God's plan that is not contrary to the God's plan for Israel. They are one and the same. God's plan for the Gentiles is the same as for the Jews. But then, of course, they get all put off by issues of the law and various customs that they disagree about. But there was one thing that they had together, one thing in common, and that was a faith in the one Lord Jesus Christ. A faith in the one God. Have this mind in you that was in Jesus Christ. Philippians 2, chapter 2, 5 to 11. Have this same mind in you. And they had that same mind. Jesus was Savior. Jesus was Soter. Jesus was Son of God. Now, you say Jesus was Son of God. Jesus was King of Kings. Well, there was a man in that day who walked into the temple in Jerusalem, and he says, "Rabbi, I have a problem with my son. My son grew up a Jew, and he has gone out and become a Christian. He came back home a Christian." And the rabbi says, "Well, you know, a funny thing you'd say that, because my son went out like that, and he became a Christian and came home." And the rabbi says, "Well, we need to pray about this." And as they're praying, God interrupts them and says, "You know, funny thing you would say that." All right. Paul is way out of the box. And so he goes on his second missionary journey, which will take him up through Antioch and Ephesus and all these other places. Paul, like Mark, who went along with him, John Mark, had an apocalyptic faith. What's an apocalyptic faith? It means Jesus is coming back. Back in those days, Paul and John Mark and others believed that Jesus was coming back at any moment, and they lived with that as if they had that second coming hot on their heels, and they evangelized like that. 2,000 years later, we still live as an apocalyptic group of Christians. Most Christians believe Jesus is coming back, but the Bible says of that day and hour, no one knows. And then you get all these people on TV who try to predict the day and hour. And I'm going to tell you, they are wolves in sheep's clothing, because nobody knows that day and hour, but we still live as apocalyptic Christians. Paul and the others evangelized their converts with that idea. They evangelized areas that we can't even imagine. Thessaloniki, which is what it was called. For years, it was called Thessaloniki. That's its real name. We call it Thessalonica. How many people did they have in that little town? They had 200,000 people when Paul went there. Can you imagine going to the synagogue with 200,000 people in Thessalonica? Let me tell you how out of the box Paul is. In the original Jerusalem church, there were 20 to 30 hardcore followers of Jesus Christ. men, women, villagers, fishermen, and eventually, who else adds to their group? Slaves. There are a number of slaves who come to Christianity because they are liberated from life from this world. Between that time of 20 to 30 hardcore followers and between the time before Constantine, little history lesson real quickly. Constantine became the emperor of Rome in 312, 313 AD. That's when he had his vision, what they call a vision on the Milvian Bridge. He saw a big sun, he saw a cross above it, and he saw the words, "In this sign conquer." It's a Chi-Rho sign, the first couple letters of Jesus' name. Before Constantine, 20 to 30 Christians had grown to 3 million Christians before Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. That's church growth. That's thinking out of the box. We're not even sure if those other places would have been evangelized when they did, had it not been for Paul. Paul was a passionate messenger for Jesus Christ. And what do we do when we are called to be disciples? And well, I go to church on Sunday and I get down there on occasion. We're not the greatest evangelists in the world for Jesus Christ, are we? Well, Paul starts out on his second journey. He travels to Corinth. He has to remind the people that he is not the Messiah. It is Jesus that is Messiah. He is in Ephesus. A lot of people think he was in jail in Ephesus. He was not. He was not in jail because he was a Roman citizen. He goes on to Thessalonica. Now there's a problem. Thessalonica is an important city. It is a free state status city. Why is that important? It's important because they enjoyed freedoms that no other area enjoyed. It basically meant that Rome left them alone. They are anxious about their free city status. And they are constantly kissing up to Rome to maintain this free state status, this free city status that they enjoy. And in the midst of their anxiety about losing it, guess who comes along? Why, Paul and Silas. John Mark had been sent back to Jerusalem. Paul and Silas come along and start preaching in the synagogue, and they say there's a new king. There's a new person who is the Messiah. He is the suffering servant who is the Messiah from old. There are two charges that are leveled against Paul and Silas. The first charge is disturbing the peace. So what? So what, right? Aren't there people that along 4th Avenue and downtown and the university kids and lots of other people who disturb the peace and they get what? A misdemeanor violation? Little thing they go to court on a misdemeanor, disturbing the peace. What's disturbing the peace in Thessalonica? What peace? The Pax Romana, Roman peace. If you're disturbing the Roman peace, what are you doing? You are usurping the empire. In their case, they charge Paul and Silas with usurping the power of the Roman Empire, a death sentence. That's number one. Number two, what is Paul doing? He's proclaiming a new king. He's proclaiming a new emperor, in a sense. That's how people took it. Back in the 1st century, if you predicted the coming of a new king, if you predicted the coming of an emperor, you were going to be under a death sentence. You were not allowed to predict an emperor as long as the current emperor was still alive. It was a death sentence to do so. Paul and Silas are both charged with 2 death sentences. But they flee. They are gone. And so this person named Jason, where in the world do you get that? This constant mention of Jason. When a Jew or a Greek person converted, they often took the name of Jason. We don't know why. Folks, those early churches kept their eyes on the prize. They called those early churches voluntary associations. That was their name. They weren't called churches necessarily. They were called voluntary associations. And those voluntary associations were forbidden. Under penalty of death again, they were forbidden. You could not practice your faith apart from what the Roman religion was. But you know what? You can't hold back the power of the kingdom of God, and the body of Christ rose against all odds. You cannot hold back the power of the Son of God. And the church grows. Paul acknowledged Christ as the risen King. Our efforts must proclaim that message. It must proclaim it through the word spoken and taught. It must proclaim it through the word sung and played. It must proclaim it through the mission efforts of social services like Reverend Susan's church in the heart of New York City to help the least of these, our brethren. I close with this. I learned a week and a half ago that one of the oldest biblical manuscripts, a little fragment, was found recently. It's not really been made public yet. This fragment is centuries older than the oldest biblical fragments that have been found. And you know what that fragment says? It says that people are to care for the orphan, widowed, and the displaced. Now, there are lots of copies of manuscripts that say that. This one predates all copies of all manuscripts. It is the latest find in the biblical archaeological world, and it talks about helping the orphan, the widowed, and the displaced. That's what we are called to do. We're called to worship and learn. We're called to learn about our faith. We're called to sing about our faith, to proclaim our faith. We're called to help those in distress. We must pray without ceasing and ask God for strength. It's not easy to be in a church after a while. You get tired of disagreeing with people. You get tired of committee work. You get tired of having to get ready to come to church. You get tired of the same old, same old. But I tell you this, in all of these, and for all the non-caring people in this world who are going to get left in the dust of time, the kingdom of God will move on. The cross of Christ will move on. And so we say, Hail, King of heaven, Prince of Peace, King of kings and Lord of lords. We await you, Jesus Christ. Amen.